So now I'm in conversation with Martyn Ware, who's a legend in the music industry and many other areas. He's a Sheffield-born man, and he's got a stellar career behind him. So we're very grateful for Martyn to join us for this virtual conference on out-of-home technologies tomorrow. So Martyn, just to run through a little bit about your career, you started your life in Sheffield. How did you get involved with the entertainment industry?
Um, well, start off being a fan, of course, of music, and I was very lucky. I went to a kind of youth club, a kind of arts youth club in Sheffield called Meat Whistle, which was sponsored by the local council, and that's where I met Glenn, who's in Heaven 17, and Ian, lots of friends that I'm still friends with now, and it gave me a kind of, at the age of kind of 16, 17, gave me an amazing kind of test bed for all sorts of interesting and stupid experiments, which gave me an interest in, I suppose, coming out of my shell and entertaining people as well, but also an interest in the idea of art as from an installation point of view, because a lot
Oh,
of the people I were talking to, sorry, carry on.
no, no. So
Right.
art and installation. I didn't realise that you started that early. You know, I'd always seen, obviously, thought of you as being a music guy, but obviously your involvement and interest in art and installation goes back a really long way. Then.
A very long, well, 40 years, really. I mean, in the very first instances, even pre the Human League, which I founded, um, there was always a kind of visual element to what we were doing, because we acknowledged that our performance on stage was quite boring, because we were tied to keyboards and we weren't really natural performers at that point. So we thought we'd better have something for people to look at while they're listening to our music, and hence we had a kind of art installation. I mean, our gigs were more like art installations really than gigs. We had a series of screens behind us with Kodak Kodak carousel projectors projecting various abstract imagery and popular culture imagery onto screens,
Mm.
accompanying the songs that we performed. So that was
Yeah.
40 years ago.
Wow. So were Pink Floyd any kind of influence in that area? You know, because I know that
Well,
you like them as well. Yeah.
yeah, Pink Floyd at that time were, yeah, I mean, you heard all these stories about, I mean, I lived in Sheffield at the time, but you heard stories about their amazing immersive light shows, liquid wheel projections, even quadraphonic sound installations, which they did
Yeah.
at the Roundhouse. I live in Camden, so I just lived down the road from that,
Yeah.
and that all took place there. And those sort of things were, I mean, the biggest influences on us at that point were, we were together with my friends, we were all big prog rock fans.
Yeah.
So we saw um, people like King Crimson performing live, which is a big kind of immersive experience in light.
Mm.
Uh, People like early Genesis. Um, I mean, just a lot of very experimental type. It wasn't just the kind of rock show thing that we expect nowadays. People were experimenting with all sorts of kind of post-hippie projection techniques, for instance, and even
Yeah.
imagery. And
Yeah.
so that was a big influence on us. Yeah.
And you were playing the keyboards from the beginning.
I have never had a day's musical training in my life.
Mm.
Um, I can't read music, uh, but I was always interested in synthesizers and electronic music. So
Right.
my first purchase was a Rolf Harris stylophone, and
Right.
then I went on to get
I
a
remember
dual.
those.
Yeah, yeah. I went on to get a dual stylus stylophone, which were quite rare,
Mm.
um, and that gained me access to a couple of um imaginary groups that we used to put together at Meat Whistle.
Yeah.
I thought I was Eno at the time,
All
And
right.
then my friend Ian, yeah, my friend Ian Marsh decided to build his own synthesizer from a Mapling kit, um, and it was an amazing thing. It looked the real deal. It looked like something that Keith Emerson would play, but I
Yeah.
think only about 10% of the switches and knobs were actually connected up, and
Right.
it could mainly make motorbike noises. It was very hard to tune,
Mm.
and you know, we were really messing around. But it was, looking back on it now, if we'd not have done that, we wouldn't have had such an original attitude towards composition.
Mm. Yeah, that was really innovative. And but what intrigues me is if you can't read music, how do you just play by ear, or
Yeah,
how does that work?
I've
Yeah.
always had an amazing. It sounds very arrogant. I know my weaknesses. I've got plenty of those, but I know I've got an amazing ear for music. I can pick up just about any instrument and within a minute reproduce any melody that people um, sing at me or I hear on a record
Mm.
um, within 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's actually, strangely enough, a talent that both my children have picked up.
Yeah.
It's obviously passed down. It's a genetic thing. So um, that really is the key skill that you need to be a songwriter, a producer. If you can hear an idea in your head, it
Mm.
doesn't matter what the theory about it is.
Mm.
I remember here's an example of the first time when we first had success with Heaven 17 in the early 80s, and I went into a records sheet music store on Denmark Street and in London, and I saw they got the sheet music for Luxury Gap, our second album, and I looked at it and I'm looking at this and it's got, looking at all the manuscripts and it's got like, in the key of, nine flats and all these weird, and it looked amazing. I thought, I had no idea I was this talented. And but it just shows it's about being able to hear things in your mind and construct arrangements in your mind. And
Mm.
and imitation is as important. Now, imitation is not the right word. Being able to take other people's work as a template and build upon it is the most important skill.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's fantastic. So when was it that Human League brought out "Don't You Want Me, Baby"? I mean, that's probably one of the things that Human League's most known by.
Yeah, that was after I left the band, but that was in '81, I think,
Yeah, yeah,
'82.
yeah, yeah. Well, you have a very distinctive style with Heaven 17. So moving on, Heaven 17. Did your interest in these immersive experiences and use of art installations carry on with Heaven 17?
I've always We never performed live until the mid '90s with M17. We started at the same time as the birth of MTV, so we spent a lot of our time, a lot of our money, creating interesting videos, which enabled us to service lots of markets simultaneously.
Right.
Um, so it didn't that kind of took a back burner thing, but what informed our songwriting, for instance, was an appreciation of art and an appreciation of popular media, TV, film, even poetry, novels, science fiction. Um, we were always, and I'm saying I'm saying the whole band, not just me.
Mm.
We were always very much on the same page about being very eclectic in terms of our influences, and I think that is something. Now I teach students um, my viewpoint in these sort of things. I'm always telling them to absorb as many influences as possible, and
Mm.
use that to create stuff that's not just aping what everybody else is doing.
Yes, yeah. So when did you get involved in being a record producer? Was that in your Heaven 17 days, or because you produced for
It
other
was right
people?
from,
Yeah.
you mean for third parties? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Um, the songwriting, um, the songwriting methodology that we used involved recording to tape as we composed. So really, in essence, we were always producers right from the very start of our songwriting. So consequently, when it came to other people asking to us to kind of impart our sound onto their songwriting, it was a natural transition. It wasn't like, oh, I don't know if I can do it. I think I'm a good producer because I can get inside people's heads. I'm very empathetic, and I can extract very good performances out of them. But not only that, I'm good at arrangement. I'm good at dealing with session musicians, and I'm very good at putting stuff together. You know, from a shall we say, a cultural production perspective.
Yeah.
And those are all the skills that you need to be a record producer. And so obviously I ended up setting my stall out with the first British Electric Foundation album, which was my kind of production arm name, where I got famous singers to come in and sing versions of it, unusual electronic versions of famous songs. And that was me. That was my calling card. That's how I met Tina Turner, for instance.
Yeah.
And and people like Billy Mackenzie and lots of other people. But the main thing was Tina Turner, and she came back when she was doing, when her and Roger Davis were putting together Private Dancer, and said, would you work on some stuff with me for that? And I did. And that really shot me into the, if you like, the Premier League of producers almost instantaneously.
Yeah, absolutely. And having seen the musical Tina and seen your alter ego on stage representing you, I have heard it said that a large part of Tina Turner becoming popular again was down to your influence in the track that you did together that brought her back into profile again.
Well, Let's Stay Together was the biggest selling 12-inch single in American history when it came out.
Yeah,
It wasn't the biggest hit that she had from that album, but I think what happened was I was very intent on firstly, she'd kind of turned her back on being a soul singer, and I think she's one of the greatest soul singers that's ever lived. She wanted to be a kind of rock singer, and I said, you've really got to nail your legacy on this, Tina. And secondly, we can put you in a more contemporary context. And I think that what should we call it? That juxtaposition of contemporaneity and the beauty of authentic soul singing was what created the majesty of Let's Stay Together.
Yeah, no, it's a super record. And I really enjoyed the musical, so I'll give it a plug and say you really ought to go and see it.
The musical is good. I'm the light relief, though, I have to say. I'm the comedy act.
Well, yeah, I mean, I like the guy's performance who played your character.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on to more recent times, we've had an involvement in the past at the Serious Games Institute where you introduced us to immersive sound environments. Would you say a little bit about your immersive sound environments in cities and in museums, etc.?
Sure. Well, I've got a company round about the year 2000. I formed a company with Vince Clarke from Eurasia called Illustrious Company, because I could see the way the music industry was going. It was it was getting more and more generic and less interesting to me. And I thought I'd like to get back to doing something that really excited me, and kind of shall we say, reskill actually. Because I'd already got the kind of skills of being a successful producer and having sold lots of records and songwriter and performer and blah blah blah. But I liked the idea of getting back to doing something future facing that was artistically driven. So I came to the conclusion that immersive sound was the future. I naively thought that with my kind of reputation and skill set that I could popularize this software that we created called 3D Audioscape within 2 or 3 years, and we'd all be sitting pretty on our private islands. And of course, that wasn't the case. It's taken the best part of 20 years for this kind of technology and similar ones to become almost mainstream now. But nobody can have the 20 years experience of massive urban installations that we've been doing around the world. And well, not just massive ones, I mean, medium sized and small ones as well. But we've done a vast range of different types of installations, including the whole of the Millennium Bridge during the 2012 Olympics in London. We've done every major museum and art gallery in London as well. We've done lots of stuff all around the world, about 60 odd major projects in the last 20 years. And I've become kind of an evangelist for immersive sound and its effect on the world around us, not just in space using ambisonics in 3 dimensions, but also online. For instance, we can deliver 3-dimensional sound content on headphones, or in a home environment. And we do most of what we do is highly bespoke and very we're not immensely we don't do multiple iteration multiple similar installations. I mean, everything we seem to do is adapted to whatever the environment we work in. So in that respect, it's got more in common with kind of an architectural practice in a lot of ways. I often work with architects than it does with the world of music production.
I remember you telling me, if I remember rightly, you did an installation in Brighton that was supposed to be played on a Saturday evening, and it was designed to cut down on some of the unsociable behaviour.
That's right.
Can you talk about that, or?
Yeah, sure. We were commissioned by, we were approached by believe it or not, the Noise Abatement Society. It's quite funny in itself.
Yes.
But they've kind of repurposed their historical role into trying to make everybody's sound environment better, because they've acknowledged defeat, that they can't just make everybody shut up, and cities are going to get noisier and noisier. So they're trying to make it sound better and give people an appreciation of the importance of noise in creating stress, etc. Anyway, they approached us and said, they said, we've been talking to Brighton City Council. They're having a lot of trouble with a location in Brighton called, it's the junction of West Street and the main road that goes along the promenade at the bottom of the hill coming down from the station. It's where all the nightclubs are, and there's the various nightclubs in that location have a capacity of 10,000 in total. And so what happens on Friday and Saturday nights when you get stag and hen do's, and a lot of people coming from out of town for parties, is they go and drink in the different bars around Brighton, and then they all converge on the same place at the same time. And this creates chaos, and there's normally a lot of people who just want to get into the nightclub. They're normally off their heads. Not everybody, but a significant number. There's police with dogs. There's people fighting, people falling over. It's chaos. And they asked us, would we consider installing a 3D sound system that's about 100 meters long at the bottom of this this street, because they all hang out on the street, to see if we can change the atmosphere of the place and stop people trying to kill each other. So we did it. It was quite dangerous because there's 3,000 or 4,000 people at a time down there. If it turned nasty, you could really turn nasty. So we were in a kind of armored porter cabin with guards, playing various immersive soundscapes of different descriptions, subliminally to the people, to see if we could alter their mood. And it worked spectacularly well, to the extent that we were meant to be doing our thing until about 2 in the morning, and at 11:30 the police decided to move their resources and their police and the dogs to other places in the city, because they claimed that there was no prospect of any trouble. And it was the first time ever that there'd been no injuries, no hospitalizations, no arrests. And the kind of soundscapes we were doing were natural sounding soundscapes, but some fun things like slowing down charts at the time, which was Countdown by Beyonce, by half, but keeping it at the same pitch. Doing things like taking a song and slowly changing the tempo so it got slower and slower to slow down people's heartbeats.
Yes.
Many different techniques, and all in three-dimensional sound. And this was without telling people what was going on. There were no flyers handed out. There were no signs.
Yeah.
And it was all filmed by behavioural scientists from the University of Sussex down the road. And now it's held up as a case, the most effective case study for positive. It's called positive soundscaping, this movement. The idea of creating new interventions in cities to try and make the environment better places to live. It's held up at various conferences around the world. It's presented as a spectacular success.
That's a fantastic story. Just to round off our little chat, Heaven 17, you're still going strong. Obviously, your activism
stronger than ever.
Stronger than ever. Your activism is a little bit curtailed at the moment.
We've had 25 gigs. We've had 25 concerts postponed so far this year.
Wow, yeah, wow. Well, there'll be an opportunity to talk about that tomorrow in the webinar when we're talking about the effect of COVID-19. So I'm looking forward to speaking to you again tomorrow, along with the other panelists. So I think it's going to be a really good session. I would, appreciate. I'm going to send you some more details about what's happening, but any promotion that you can do to get people into this environment to see.
I'll share it on my socials.
That would be wonderful. Okay, thanks very much, Martyn. I'll draw that to a close now, and then.